right, welcome everyone. I'll bring to order the February 1st, 2021 Lower Merion Planning Commission meeting. And tonight will be another in a series of unique meetings where we are fortunate to have some guests. The Narberth Planning Commission is joining us, and as I will assume, some members of the public as well from Narberth. And the reason being for a joint meeting and discussion over the proposal at 3 Elmwood Avenue. So in a moment, I'll hand it over to their chair to do his own opening activities or remarks. But I just want to highlight the agenda for the attendees. Tonight we'll be covering the tentative sketch land development plan for 3 Elmwood Avenue in conjunction with Narberth. And then after that, we'll move on to Lower Merion's tentative sketch land development plan for 121 East City Avenue in Bala Cynwyd. And then finally, under the infamous designation of time permitting, we'll have recommendations on a proposed ordinance for generators and air conditioning equipment projections or an amendment thereof. So I'd want to note tonight's attendance. We have 5 Lower Merion Planning Commission board members in attendance. Myself, David Rosenbaum, Bill Cook, Jerry Stern, and Adam Podowitz-Thomas. Tim Matthews and George Ross could not be with us tonight. So before we get into, we'll have to adopt our own minutes as well. And I have a couple comments on procedure tonight regarding the collaboration with Narberth. But let me introduce Todd Bressi, their chair. If you'd like to open your own part of this meeting, now would be a great time.
So can I ask everyone joining us from Narberth Planning Commission if you could raise your hand, and I will add you all.
They're all screaming into the void as I hand them the mic with no floor.
Right, here we are. Thank you, Scott.
Welcome.
I think our members are still gathering. I see two members. So we do have a quorum. So I'd like to call the February regular meeting of the Narberth Planning Commission order as well. As Scott indicated, we are grateful that we can share the platform tonight with the Lower Merion Planning Commission to address 3 Elmwood Avenue tentative sketch plan. After that item is completed, we will adjourn and then reconvene on our own Zoom platform to address the rest of our agenda, which is essentially a set of updates about ongoing projects, zoning revisions, heritage action plan, subdivision, land development ordinance, and any further public comment that there might be. At the moment, I see Heidi Boyes, Commissioner Heidi Boyes, and hiding under the nom de plume of Narberth Civic Association, I see Jim Spear, and I see David Brower. With us from the Narberth Planning Commission, and Eric Johnson, who is the Narberth Borough Engineer, and we will hope that Jim Cornwell will join us. So Scott, I'll turn it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So tonight, we're going to, when we get to 3 Elmwood Avenue, I have a procedure that's slightly different from how we normally handle things, but I think will work well for the circumstances. I anticipate there will be a good amount of public comment for this evening, both considering that we have 2 municipalities representing here and the interest level of this application. So the way we're going to handle that is staff will begin with the presentation of the application. And in that presentation, they'll bring the applicant on who will have a few things to say that will tie into that and their own chance to say anything. We're limiting the applicant to 10 minutes, as we always do, of commentary or less. And to hold off on the board members as far as Q&A, which is normally part of this process, we'd like to get to the public comment earlier on so that we have a good chance to hear what everyone has to say and take that into account as then we move forward with our own questioning. So after we get the staff and applicant presentations, we'll move to public comment. Following that, the boards will participate in Q&A with both staff and the applicant. And that could be combined, I think, both at the same time. And then we move to deliberations, and we'll separate that out, Lower Merion and Narberth, with each going through their own needs for discussion and approvals if necessary, or I'm sorry, conditions if necessary. So if that's okay with you, Chairman Bressy?
Yes, sir.
Great. Before we move into that, one last bit of business. We have the Planning Commission meeting minutes for Lower Merion of January 25th that were supplied by staff. Do I have any motion for, or first off, do I have any comments on the minutes from the Lower Merion board? And then a motion to adopt.
I'll make a motion to adopt the minutes.
I'll second.
Second. Bill seconds. All in favor, aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, and motion passes. Okay, we are ready to jump in. I think and Jillian might have a little bit again of introduction to the virtual process here, and then we can begin with 3 Elmwood Avenue.
Yes. I guess I also want to share that there was an agenda item, discussion of fences, which has been tabled from the agenda, in case anyone is here for that. So I'm just going to quickly run through some of the meeting procedures. The public is attending this meeting as attendees. The public will be able to view and hear the Planning Commission, but will not be able to speak until the Planning Commission chair indicates public comments being accepted. Public comment will be accepted on all agenda items. If you wish to comment or ask a question, please raise your hand. Please use the raise your hand icon by selecting this icon. It's shown here in the upper right portion of my screen. If your question's answered or the comment's no longer relevant, you can deselect the hand icon to lower your hand. And staff is requesting that no one, you try to refrain from using the Q&A feature. If you have a question, we'd prefer that you ask it so that everyone can hear the question. It can be distracting to us to try to answer and also stay on top of meeting minutes and responding to Planning Commission comments. Staff will unmute attendees when it's their turn to comment. Staff will mute attendees after they complete their comment. The commenter shall provide their name and address for the meeting record. Public comments limited to 3 minutes per individual per agenda item and 5 minutes when an individual represents a group. If you're experiencing technical difficulties, you can send a chat to staff for assistance. As you may be aware, the recommendations for the Planning Commission, Lower Merion Planning Commission, will be forwarded to the Building and Planning Committee meeting. The agenda for February 3rd is where the recommendation for 3 Elmwood would be forwarded. And then for the 121 East City Avenue will be on the February 10th Building and Planning Committee meeting. If you want to participate in either of those meetings, you should utilize the public comment at lowermerion.org email and request access. And I can jump right into our first item if we're ready. Okay. So the first item on the meeting agenda is 3 Elmwood Avenue. This is a continuation of the discussion that was had at the December 7th Planning Commission meeting, where this was reviewed by both planning commissions. Elmwood Avenue is located, highlighted here in blue. It's located along East Wynwood Road and also Elmwood Road right here. There's currently a single family house located on Elmwood Road. And this fronts Elmwood Road. As many people here know, Elmwood terminates right here and does not connect into East Wynwood Road. The line shown in yellow is the municipal boundary line. So the portion of the property on this side is Narberth, and the portion of the property along here is located in Lower Merion Township. The portion of the property to be developed is currently unimproved. These are some images of the site as viewed from East Wynwood Road. It's not very viewable from East Wynwood. You kind of have to go into the property. There's a lot of green along the street edge. So the applicant's proposing to subdivide 3 Elmwood Avenue to create 4 lots. Lot 1 is shown to maintain the existing single-family dwelling on Elmwood Avenue, and lots 2, 3, and 4 are shown to contain 3 new twin buildings with a total of 6 residential units. So there's 2 units in each, 2 units on Lot 2, 2 units on Lot 3, and 2 units on Lot 4. And along with this proposal, the applicant is proposing 18 parking spaces, 8 of which are located in the attached garages. You can kind of see them here. 2 per unit for units, I believe 2, 3, 4, and 5. And the rest are additional parking that would be available to guests and for the end units. And I'm actually going to have the applicant wanted to provide a some commentary on the evolution of the plan, kind of walk the Planning Commission through where the plan started and how we've gotten to this point. So I'm going to ask Christian.
Hello. Hi, Jillian. Thank you. Will you? Okay. Great. Thank you. So this is the existing conditions plan that Jillian has up here. For anyone who wasn't here in the past, the railroad tracks run along the top of the screen. You can see them there in the upper left. They run from left to right. On the left-hand side of the screen is East Wynwood Road. And along the bottom, as Jillian said, is Elmwood. And so there's one existing home here right off of Elmwood Avenue. The creek bisects the site, and to the left of the creek right now is undeveloped. And so, Jillian, if you want to switch to the next slide. This was the plan we originally submitted in July, which was 2 multifamily buildings. They had 5 units each with surface parking in the rear, some covered parking. After several rounds of Zoom meetings with just some staff members, we, Jen, if you can switch, or actually, I guess stay on this for a second. We talked about several options. One was the traffic flow and whether it made more sense to loop around the building instead of one 2-way driveway. But there was the bulk of the discussion really came from, did this bulk meet the single family and small multifamily development further down Wynwood Road and in Narberth. And this discussion was there weren't really any other homes that were 80 feet wide in Narberth. And so they felt this was out of scale. So Jillian, if you could switch to the next screen. That's when we switched to 3 buildings instead of 2 to try to get them more narrow. Which is this plan and the one that was presented to you in early December. At that time, we had 3 buildings. They were quad units, so 12 units total, divided into 3 separate lots. And the discussion, I think for that, a lot of it revolved around the density and the traffic generated from that. So we were tabled from that agenda without making a decision, and we went back as a team and regrouped and made some tough decisions, and the applicant decided that we would switch to what is the newest plan. Jillian, if you could switch to that one. This is now 3 buildings with 2 units each, so it's at 6. So 6 units. So we started at 10, went to 12 with the reconfiguration, and now we're down to 6. With that comes reduced impervious coverage, greatly reduced traffic from the unit count, and then some other changes. One of the conditions in the December recommended conditions of approval was to pull the buildings back to the so that the front of the porches would be at the 20-foot setback line. There's a discrepancy between the Lower Merion setback and the Narberth. Lower Merion has a minimum 10 and a maximum 20. Narberth has a minimum of 25. And so what seemed to meet both of those the best was if we pulled the front of the porches back to that 20 feet. And so that was another change that we made with this plan. So we feel happy with this plan. As you know, we've gone through a lot of back and forth with both staffs, and we appreciate the input. And I think what we ended up with was a nice plan that we're happy with, and we hope that you are as well.
Thank you, Chris. So I'm just going to highlight some of the issues that staff pulled out in memo. Not all of them, but some of the ones that I think there may be some discussion about tonight. So one of the issues that we elaborated on was traffic and parking, the traffic study. Staff noted that the traffic study is required to be submitted with the preliminary plan, and it will evaluate operational levels of service for the North Wynwood Avenue intersection with East Wynwood Road and the proposed driveways. We included it shall include recommended improvements and or adjustments to the North Wynwood Avenue signalization and turn restrictions, and identify including the possibility of a left turn lane. A left turn lane from East Wynwood Road into the site, in the study. Staff's also included a condition requiring the applicant to provide a trip distribution model to determine whether there would be any negative impact to the nearby neighborhoods and whether any mitigation measures are appropriate. Staff talked at length about the pedestrian circulation and walkability. It's important to both staff, and it was the topic of many of the comments that we received from the community. There was a condition that was included in staff's recommendations that the applicant work with Narberth Borough to investigate any improvements that could be made to the wooden bridge and the sidewalk over the culvert at the terminus of Elmwood Avenue, and that is located right here and visible in the pictures on your screen. Staff also asked that the traffic study identify key points of pedestrian conflict and potentials for mitigating those conflicts. And likewise, as Chris had said, there was a lot of discussion previously about the frontage of the buildings. The applicant has shifted the buildings back to give a little bit of space there, but staff has included a condition requiring the applicant to work with staff when designing this frontage to ensure that the landscape plan creates an appropriate transition to the residential development and includes a landscape verge, a 5-foot sidewalk, street trees, and foundation plantings. We wanted to point out that conceptual building elevations have been provided, and that both Narberth and Lower Merion zoning codes include architectural standards, and compliance with those standards would be reviewed at preliminary plan, but that we would be looking to ensure that the architectural design is sympathetic and complementary to the surrounding residential community. And so this is the rendering of Lot 3, Lot 2, and this is the Lot 3 rendering, Lot 2. As Chris had mentioned, there is floodplain located on the property. It's shown here. The dark blue section is the creek that traverses the site. The blue is the floodplain associated with that creek. Staff is considering the impact of the development on the downstream, or staff has included a condition requiring that the impact of the development on the downstream ecosystem be considered, and that the applicant work with both Lower Merion and Narberth's environmental advisory councils on the landscape plan and the riparian buffer plan. Staff's also included conditions requiring a maintenance and operations plan for this environmentally sensitive area, to provide access easements to Lower Merion and Narberth, to allow access to the site for emergency maintenance and as needed basis, and to investigate providing an easement to a third party to monitor this portion of the site to ensure compliance. And these are just some images of the existing stream. With the development, the applicant is proposing a stormwater management system in the rear of the property. This is tentative sketch. So the applicant is showing us the location. It will be fully designed at preliminary plan phase. And in our memo, we did note that the application requires 3 areas of relief for the Narberth code, none for Lower Merion, but 3 areas of relief for Narberth Saldo code. And I did mention this at the beginning of the presentation, but this Lower Merion's review will forward this to the Building and Planning Committee, the Planning Commission's recommendation to the Building and Planning Committee on February 3rd. And then ultimately it would be reviewed by the Board of Commissioners on February 17th. And I'm hoping that Narberth can also provide a an overview of their schedule. So as of right now, Lower Merion Planning Commission is looking to make a recommendation on the tentative sketch plan, and Narberth is looking for recommendations on the requested relief, a recommendation on the orientation determination, and a recommendation on the tentative sketch plan. That is my presentation.
Great. Would the applicant like to say anything in addition at this time?
I am promoting Fred. Chris, is there anyone else? John, is there anyone else you would like to, you think would like to speak?
I think Fred is the only other one that will do a presentation in the beginning here, but we do also have Frank Tavani on the line to answer traffic questions if they come up.
Welcome, Fred. And if you could keep your comments to under 10 minutes, but feel free.
I will keep them very brief. Thank you. I appreciate, Jillian, your explanation of this development. There are recommended conditions that Jillian has prepared. I think that they have been prepared in some coordination and cooperation with Narberth staff and your chair, Mr. Bressi, and obviously they will need to be considered by you all at both Lower Merion and Narberth. I can tell you that we have carefully reviewed them on behalf of the applicant, and the conditions of approval are acceptable to the applicant. I won't go through them all, or virtually any of them, other than to say that they are acceptable. As Chris explained, this plan has been through quite a process, and of plans I've been involved in over the years, I think it's been challenging because the property is located in 2 municipalities, and trying to meet all of the requirements that are applicable to the plan has been quite a challenge. And I think Chris has done a great job in hearing all of the comments we've received from staff and you when you have previously considered this plan. We would hope that the choices that have been made to address the comments are good ones. I know one of the concerns has been with respect to parking, and there are those who think the parking is too much. There are those who think the parking is not sufficient. Given the location of the property, I think we've reached a good balance on that, and we've been able to reach a good balance on that with a reduction in the impervious cover, because there has been that significant diminution and reduction of units in this development for which parking is required. So we are here and happy to answer any questions that you have about any aspect of the plan. Chris is intimately familiar with the details, and this plan is now in what I'd call pretty fine balance, and hopefully it addresses the comments that you've been making in a satisfactory manner, and we hope you can recommend to your respective governing bodies that it be approved.
Great. So as I said before, I'm sorry, here, echo. I'd like to postpone the Q&A till after public comment. That way, the public comment may be wrapped up into our Q&A at that time and address issues that are identified or need further explanation. So I want to also reiterate with the public comment period, like I said, we do anticipate a number of people speaking, and reminder that everyone is limited to 3 minutes unless you're speaking for a group, in which case you'll have 5 minutes. I will be running the timer, so you may hear the little alarm over the microphone, but I just want to keep things moving. I'll also ask, as we often ask at our meetings, that if you have a point that's being made by multiple persons, it's okay to reiterate that point, but I advise you to please spend your time on additional points or new topics that might be covered, so that we're not hearing the same thing over and over, and it can be more effective. So with that, Jillian will facilitate anyone with a raised hand.
Yeah, so if you can please raise your hand if you have something you would like to say. The first person is Judy Watman.
Please identify, especially tonight, your address, name, and which municipality you reside in.
My name is Judy Watman. I live at 120 Elmwood Avenue, and I'm in Narberth. Can we see a picture of building 4? That was excluded. Is it 18 parking spaces for guests? So that means 3 parking spaces, extra parking spaces for each unit?
Yeah, we'll cover that in the Q&A. I'll write it down and clarify that, but I believe I heard them say it was six guest spots for 2 per unit.
So 12.
Correct. 6 plus 12. Yes.
Okay. Next we have Rosemary McDonough. Rosemary, you are muted.
There you go.
Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Rosemary McDonough. I live at 9 Elmwood Avenue in Narberth. I'm just curious. I like the direction we're going with this, but it still seems to me that the 3 twins are wider than the current twins in our neighborhood, even the widest ones. Can you confirm that is true, please?
We'll address that, let the applicant address that after the comment.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Deborah Lonsdorf.
Okay, unmute. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So you mentioned earlier there was 3 areas of relief. Oh, at 128 Chestnut Avenue in South Narberth. There were 3 areas of relief that Narberth needed, but I didn't really have time to quite see what those areas were, and I wonder what that was. And the other question was, I'm concerned about the egress out of the units, and are you considering at all opening Elmwood and having some kind of a any egress through there, through Elmwood Avenue?
Jillian, if you want to re-show or just state the requested relief items, and while you're doing that, I can say that the township has made no plans that I'm aware of that it would be reopening Elmwood Avenue.
Okay. The units that you showed had one entrance, but they were twins. They're supposed to be twins. Where is the other entrance?
So I'm showing on the screen now the areas of relief being requested by the applicant from the Narberth Subdivision Land Development Code. And they include relief to not require profiles of existing roads adjacent to the tract, to provide a side lot line not perpendicular to the right of way for the length of the side lot line.
I can read that, I'm sorry, but I'm not
Okay.
sure what these things mean. Can you explain them?
I think we can have the applicant explain in greater detail.
Thank you. And can somebody tell me where the second entrance is for the twins? I mean, what you showed looked like a single house.
Yeah, there were two entrances. There was one entrance and one exit.
Okay, so
for three units, the three buildings. Sorry.
I mean, this one on the left that you had there, that's a twin. That's two townhomes.
Julian, I can help with that. These are the renderings that we submitted in November for the December Planning Commission when we had the buildings as quads, and at that time there was one entrance. We did resubmit renderings in January that show the two entrances. I could either present them on my screen or I could email them to you if you'd like.
You can pull them up on your screen.
Since we're talking about it, we should see what is actually being proposed and not what was being proposed.
Right, and in the application packet, the correct renderings were provided. So yeah, if we could see those, that would be great.
This is the lot 2 rendering. So here are the two building entrances here, one on each. This is lot 3, and then this is the lot 4. And these are very schematic at this stage.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Julian, may I add that for Deborah, you may know this already, but at this phase of the review of the project, we're not reviewing those features of the building. Those would be reviewed at the preliminary plan review to make sure they're consistent with our code. Lower Merion Township also has architectural review standards as well. So those are informational at this point. They would not be part of what would be considered to be the tentative sketch plan approval, and those would be discussed at further length at the next round of approval.
Sure, thank you. But I think it's important particularly when you're talking to the public, that that we see what's going on, because I would have no way of understanding all the stuff that you guys understand. So I appreciate seeing the actual designs.
Okay, next we have Alexandra Ting.
Thank you. Okay, I agree with Deborah, and I would like to know how many living units are planned in each side of each twin, and why are there so many parking spaces if we really don't need them? The houses around the building don't have that many parking spaces, and actually only one is required per living unit. So why 18? Seems like a huge amount. And if we're trying to eliminate or reduce impermeable surface, we should reduce the parking spaces. And the other question I have is, why are these buildings so large? They're larger than any twin in the neighborhood, and each side of each twin is larger than the existing large house on the first lot. And I'm also wondering, why is egress into Elmwood not considered? Because you can do that without opening Elmwood into East Wynwood. You can have just a bridge that goes diagonally into from the corner property into the end of Elmwood, and then direct the traffic out there. Then you have no problem with the traffic coming in and out of East Wynwood, which could cause major accidents. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Noreen Walsh.
Hi, can you hear me? You
Yes.
can? Okay, thank you. So I wonder, has there been a calculation of how many trees are going to be eliminated with this project? I can't tell from the sketches that I looked at, like how many trees were then going to be added and what size they were going to be. But I'm assuming the trees that are on the property right now, they've been there for a long time. They have big roots and they probably take up a lot of water in that area. Many people in this area of Narberth, and I'm at 101 Woodside Avenue in Narberth, so I'm just a block over from Elmwood, have had problems, lots of problems with water seepage into their basement. And I just can't imagine how, I can't imagine that this development would not affect that seepage into people's basements, especially if all these big trees are going to be pulled out. Another concern of mine is the entrance and exit, not really the entrance off of Wynwood Road, but definitely the exit. I wonder if the cars, when they're exiting, are they going to be able to veer into the left lane on Wynwood Road, or are they going to have to stay in the right lane? Because where they're entering Wynwood Road, the cars are already that are going into that right lane are there because they're going to make a right onto North Wynwood Avenue. So, I mean, if we're going to have cars like they're trying to scooch out and get into the left lane, I see a lot of problem with that. On the other hand, I am not at all in favor of opening up Elmwood Avenue. I live on Woodside Avenue. We have a lot of traffic on our road already. I don't know where the traffic, if it came out of Elmwood, would exit Narberth onto Wynwood Road, because at the end of my street where it meets with Wynwood, there's hardly any room for cars to like squish in and out because there's parking on the street there, and there's only like a length of one car to pull over, so you've got cars that are backed up half a block back waiting for the cars to get through, and then the people that are coming off of Wynwood Avenue making either a right or a left onto Woodside Avenue, there's like hardly any area for them to pull over. So it's always a puzzle as to how you're finagling that with the cars coming in or going out opposite you. So I would be very opposed to having those cars come off of Elmwood Avenue and then be exiting from Woodside onto Wynwood Road. The only thing I can think of as a solution in that would be to make Woodside Road one way and make Chestnut one way going the other way. And now I also disagree about the parking, and somebody had mentioned this before, that some people think there should be less of it, some people think there should be more of it. As I looked at it, you've got 2 twins without any parking, so that means probably 4 of the 18 spots will be taken up by those other twins that don't have parking, which, when I counted it up, left only 6 extra parking spots for all the guests of those 6 large twins. That doesn't seem feasible to me. If that's the idea, where are the additional guests going to park? I also know there's households that have more than 2 cars each. What's going to happen? Like, what are you envisioning? Are they going to park on Short Ridge Road? Are they going to park on Elmwood Avenue? Where is this overflow going to go?
We'll ask the applicant to address the parking. The timer has expired, though.
Okay. Would you please also ask them to address the safety of the exit way onto Wynwood Avenue and how that's going to be made safe? Thank you. And overall, I'm very much against this. I think this is land that we are running out of undeveloped land in Lower Merion Township as well as Narberth. It's just ridiculous that we're going to let every single space of undeveloped land, be filled up with more and more homes and apartment buildings. This is way out of hand.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Ms. Walsh's name reminds me, I should have said up front, we did receive numerous public comments before the meeting started via email, and that was distributed to members of the Lower Merion Planning Commission, and I assume Narberth did as well.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Walsh. Next, we have David Berto.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. I mean, it's definitely an improvement from what I've seen in the past. My question really comes with traffic. It was discussed, I believe, in the meeting in December for the additional units. But my question is, moving forward, in the borough, we have new developments coming at Montgomery Avenue, Forest and Windsor, Forest and Haverford, North Narberth Avenue behind Haverford Avenue, Haverford Avenue, North Essex, South Narberth Avenue, and Elmwood. I think my calculation is probably close to, at least right now, these aren't finalized, but I think we're going to have over, probably over 100 units being added. Since the bridge has been closed in Narberth, at least in the south side, things have been considerably reduced. It seems like there is less traffic, but when the bridge opens up in the next couple of years, my question is, with all the new development, when it is done, what's being done right now to slow traffic down and reduce the increase for accidents in the future? We know it takes years to get things done. So I'd like to have a good idea of what the township is going to be doing right now along Wynwood Avenue, because we do have problems that come along that road. So what's being done right now, looking forward when all this development does come to fruition?
Thank you, Mr. Berto. Next, we have Mary Beth Henry.
I'm Mary Beth Henry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I live at 26 Woodside Avenue. Been in Narberth for 45 years. I would like to know when a property has two municipalities reigning over them, who collects the taxes? Who gets the benefit from these residents? Anybody have that answer? Are you not hearing me? Is that the problem?
All right, people are on mute. Chris, did you have something to add? Chris Leslie?
Yeah, I can take a stab at that. I thought we were going to collect all the questions and then answer them in the respond. Okay. We're going to respond individually. I'm just indicating that I will answer that when it's time.
Okay, great. Well, that's dependent on my second question. Where are the sewers going to tie up for 6 new homes? Are they going to go into Narberth sewers, wastewater, stormwater, or will Lower Merion be handling this detail? And of course, if you don't know where the taxes are going, how do you know which community is going to have to devote resources to installation of new piping and stormwater runoff? Anybody have that answer?
We'll address that as well.
Okay, the third thing has to do with the floodplain. Will these homes be elevated? And if they'll be elevated, what's the impact on the surrounding houses that are then lower and going to receive tremendous amount of runoff? And that's probably the lowest point in Narberth. Montgomery Avenue is the Ridge Road. All the water comes right down to the Indian Creek, and it was a lake bed many years ago. So it's like a puddle waiting to happen. That's all I have to say. I would like some answers, but I guess nobody's willing to speak up. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Henry. Next, we have Nancy Mullins. Nancy, you are on mute. There you go. We are not hearing you. Nancy, while you're figuring out your audio, we're going to go to Maureen McGeehan.
Hi, Jillian, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Yes.
Okay, perfect. Sorry. I'm Maureen McGeehan, director at the Lower Merion Conservancy. The Conservancy is a member-supported nonprofit organization that protects open space, preserves historic architecture, and conserves the local watershed. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. The Conservancy has already commented on Narberth's very limited open space and the environmental sensitivity at 3 Elmwood Avenue. We've also mentioned the impact of development on our downstream neighbors and the importance to mitigate flooding to protect shared natural resources. That said, we're very pleased with this new plan. We like that it has less impervious coverage than the previous plan, with much of that reduction in impervious occurring near the floodplain. So we thank the applicant for his efforts to reduce the impact on the environment and surrounding neighborhood. We are eager to see the stormwater management plan when that time comes, and want to make sure that it does include the following: the floodplain to be maintained as a no-mow zone, and trees to be planted to allow for stream access as necessary. The open area north of the dumpster pad, we'd like to see that planted with trees to reestablish a woodland area on the property. We'd also like to see a berm created downhill from the anticipated level spreader to slow overflow, allowing more water to absorb into the ground, which would help filter out sediment and other pollutants before reaching the stream. And a couple of new things that we would like to ask the commissions to consider asking the applicant to do, and that's reduce the number of parking spaces as the county recommends, and include green stormwater infrastructure, maybe something like tree trenches or bump ins within the parking lot to help capture and filter runoff. And something unique that we've been looking at is the possibility of a pedestrian trail from the Narberth Tunnel along to the stream corridor. We believe a project like this would allow the public to continue to benefit from open space on the site. It would connect the new homes there to the larger neighborhood. And it would also open doors to funding opportunities that the Conservancy could apply for, maybe in conjunction with the borough, for restoring that entire stream corridor, which is a major concern of ours. And lastly, we look forward to a robust conversation with Lower Merion and Narberth EACs about the riparian buffer planting plan prior to the preliminary plan. So thank you.
Maureen, if just a point of clarification, I saw your email earlier. Your reference to the tunnel and a walkway alongside the stream corridor, are you referring to the existing concrete channel and the tunnel being where that goes under the railroad, or are you talking of a different?
Well, that's the once that area is, I guess that riparian area is is established to have a pedestrian walking path from the tunnel, where the tunnel lets out behind, to access what is hopefully going to be some trees and nice plantings along the stream corridor. So that's what I was thinking. And the bigger opportunity there is allowing public access there, and allowing people to continue to enjoy the open space back there does open opportunities for doing larger stream restoration projects on that site.
Scott, I just had I had a quick question. It's a little unusual, but she sent a bullet points to us as public comment, and I just wanted to make sure that what she had just said is consistent with those bullet points in terms of what they're looking for.
I think so.
I think it is, David. I've read the bullet points and I just listened to that. I kind of went through it. It looks pretty consistent.
Okay, thank you.
Good, Maureen. We had trouble receiving your comments in Narberth. Would you mind sending them to us as well, please?
Yep. Can you hear me, Todd? Sorry. Yeah, I actually thought there was one place to send them and that they would be shared with everyone. But yeah, I will gladly send those over.
With us, but there was a problem with the file. So if you could just send.
Sure.
They did share them with us, yes, but there's a problem with the file. So if you could just send
I will send those over.
I am not seeing any more hands raised. Oh, I'm sorry. Actually, Nancy Mullins is.
She tried before, right?
Yeah. Nancy?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Oh, yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. I'm Nancy Mullins. My husband and I just moved into Narberth about 1.5 years ago. We live at 119 Woodside Avenue. I have some comments and I have a few questions. Being new to speaking to people in a small local politics type setting, I am looking at the efficiency of everything that's going on here. And maybe some of you that are on these planning commissions of 2 separate communities can help me understand how we can be spending this much time going this far in 3 plans for a piece of property that's not sold yet, of a homeowner who clearly is looking to make some extra money, and not even have a traffic study to know if this is even feasible. How does that happen? I feel like a lot of people have been, including all of you in attendance at all the meetings that I've been at now over this topic. I don't understand how we can keep spinning our wheels on this, not even knowing if this is going to be feasible as according to the traffic study. So that's a question I have, not knowing how these things work, trying to understand how, in my mind, it seems extremely inefficient. Secondly, knowing that Narberth is a very old community. I've never lived in a community of this age. Knowing and respecting the age of Narberth, especially, and appreciating the fact that when Narberth was built, cars, for the most part, cars were not out driving around on the streets. And we keep trying to make Narberth a community that needs to handle cars. There are so many homes in Narberth that don't even have driveways. And yet you're going to allow someone to build these 3 structures and give them 18 parking spots? Unbelievable. It doesn't fit in Narberth. And then my question that I feel really passionate about is, are there any urban planners involved in this? Does Narberth have representation in that line? Someone that can look at this objectively, that's educated and can say, this is what's best for Narberth? I understand. I think I had someone on the planning commission come back at me, letting me know that, hey, a private homeowner can do whatever they want to do on their property. Okay, they want to sell it, they want to subdivide it, they want to do all that. Well, I want to know where the representation is for the rest of the homeowners in the community. Is there an urban planning person that is employed by Narberth? Is it the town manager? Who assumes that responsibility? That's all I need to say. I'd appreciate questions. And my husband just asked me to ask you how many waivers are needed to get this thing to pass. So those are all questions I really would appreciate answers. And thank you for your time.
All right. Any other last public comments? I see no more hands.
No, I am not seeing any more hands. Thank you, Ms. Mullins.
So I took a few notes. I think there's a few questions we can throw out there just to get them answered on behalf of the comments, and then some others which I think tie into more deeper issues that I think we'll be discussing as a result. So maybe if I could just get those straightforward questions, either the township or the applicant staff, or either the township staff or the applicant can answer, and then we'll open it up to all of the board members and make sure the other issues are covered in those discussions as well.
Mr. France, can I take a crack at the first section, the first set of those high-level questions relating to just general code and driving?
You would be my first go-to, so please.
Thanks. Couple of the questions, and I'll just introduce myself. I'm Chris Luswing. I am an urban planner. I'm the Director of Building and Planning for Lower Merion Township. I do not represent Narberth Borough. Narberth Borough is represented with planning services from the Montgomery County Planning Commission. They contract with the County Planning Commission for their review and approval and such. Couple questions I'm going to just go down that relate just generally. One of the first one, easy one, was how many units in each unit? There are 6 total units proposed on the development. There are 3 buildings. Each building is a twin, so we'll have 2 units. So there's a total of 6 units. I'm not sure how many trees are removed. That's a good one for the applicant. But the many trees that are added will be determined at preliminary plan. One thing that I think the public should be aware of, and this gets to Ms. Mullins' questions and comments. Both Narberth and Lower Merion have a land development process that encourages public input and encourages this sensitive siting of design. You know, both communities recognize that they're largely built out, and all new development is going to be rather sensitive. It's going to be going in something where somebody feels probably it shouldn't be going. It's going to probably have a lot of natural features, and it's going to be having to fit into the context that surrounds it. With that, both communities have adopted something called tentative sketch or concept planned phase. That's where we are now. And the idea of that is to really look at the density, the context, the larger ideas in almost a cartoony fashion, where you're trying to place the buildings and the driveways on a site. With that is what we've been doing. And as we've all been doing this, many of you have been coming to these meetings for several months, and we've seen different iterations of the project. And the project, as Mr. Yan has explained, has evolved. And it's evolved from 12 units at the last time people tuned in to this meeting where it's 6 units, where it's evolved to get to that point. Once that is locked down, once that sort of design becomes, okay, it complies with the code, it seems to fit within what's around it, within the code, then it moves to something called preliminary plan. Preliminary plan is when the more detailed engineering studies are required, and there's specific code requirements for each of those individual engineering benchmarks: stormwater management, traffic, natural features and landscaping and such. So each of those, when they get forward, the applicant will need to do very detailed studies. They don't do that at the tentative sketch plan phase because things could change. But then once that plan is locked down and you move to that and you know how large your project is, you know how many parking spaces, how big your buildings are, how big your driveway is, you can plan for your stormwater. If your stormwater doesn't comply with the codes, then you either need relief or you don't get relief, you don't build your project. When the applicant gets to the traffic phase, and it needs to comply with some concerns about PennDOT. If PennDOT will not grant the highway occupancy permits for the driveways, the application cannot proceed. But you don't ask, we get general ideas with that, but it's not a requirement to get approval when things are moving around from PennDOT before that phase. And then with the landscaping, both communities have landscape requirements, and the applicant will be required to meet those replacement requirements. There'll be some things for the riparian buffer, but there are also very robust streetscape requirements that require street tree plantings and such along the front of the property. So that's why I can understand some people are frustrated where some of those things aren't done, but they're just not required at this stage. They're dictated by the code, that those come later in the process. Getting to Ms. Henry's comments about what do you do with the split zone property that's in two different municipalities? This property probably shouldn't be in two municipalities. This is kind of an accident where the Wynwood Road was adjusted, several years ago, and the properties, the municipal boundary should have followed it. Wynwood Road was always a municipal boundary, and I honestly don't think anybody thought that this property was going to be developed. It wasn't on anybody's real radar. Internally, I can tell you the Lower Merion and Narberth have had some conversations about what do you do with that municipal line. It should probably be adjusted. This is also, my understanding, a legislative line. It doesn't make sense that somebody in the front of the house can vote differently in different district than somebody in the back of the house. We need to clean that up, especially after the last election. So I will tell you at the higher levels of this, there's talk about how to resolve that. But this is already going through the process of land development approval. So right now we don't have to deal with that. But wherever this falls, and I'm going to say it will probably fall within one municipality, that municipality will be responsible, will receive the taxes, and we'll have to deal with the sewers and the maintenance of that. But probably with the sewers, it all flows to the same place, whether it's in Lower Merion or Narberth, it's all going to go to the same place. And one thing I'll just comment on the concepts of questions about parking. In Lower Merion, there's been a concern with several of these infill developments of this scale of guest parking, where it's different than I think many people perceive in Narberth, where parking in front of somebody's house in Lower Merion is frowned upon. That people would like, there's always a request from neighbors of these sort of new developments to keep as much of the parking for a new development on that site, and that the parking won't bleed out into the surrounding residential neighborhoods. So I think the applicant's trying to anticipate that from a Lower Merion perspective of saying, we'll provide guest parking, because guest parking is something that when it's not properly done, it's going to be in front of somebody else's house. We've seen a couple of these developments on Montgomery Avenue that were approved, say, 5 years ago. They're to themselves, they're new townhouse developments. And when they don't have enough parking, people have to park blocks away. It's very, very difficult to do that because it's not connected to the street network, to the street grid. Here, there isn't on-street parking on Wynwood Road. Someone would have to park either, as somebody had commented, on Woodside or over on Elmwood Avenue and then walk several blocks away. Having a few extra guest spaces may make sense here, give it a little bit more flexibility and put less stress on the rest of the community. So that's more my summary of the general ones. Hopefully I knocked some of the questions off for everybody else to answer, probably particularly the applicant.
Thanks, Chris. You actually hit most of what was on my list. There's one in particular I was going to turn to the applicant for and maybe rephrase it. One of our first comments dealt with concern over the width of buildings compared to the existing housing stock, I believe on the Narberth side. If the applicant could comment just in general or however they'd like to add, efforts being made to make the architecture and design consistent with the neighborhood, which I believe was one of the topics that was brought up at one of our earlier meetings, but that might provide context to that concern as well.
Right, I can help with that. So that was one of the initial major concerns with the plan where we came in with 80-foot wide buildings. So the Lower Merion Code has a minimum frontage build out. The Narberth Code has a minimum and a maximum. Now, because the front of the site is in Lower Merion Township, the Lower Merion Code is applicable there. The Narberth is not. However, through working with both municipalities, we went from 2 buildings to 3 so that we could reduce the width of those. So now each twin is 21 feet wide, which, each half of it, which, I don't feel is a very big. Basically, they don't go a whole lot smaller than that. You might go down to, I don't know, 18 feet, and I'm not sure you'd feel comfortable going much smaller. So in terms of each side, it's 21, which then is 42 feet total, which is the maximum in Narberth for some other building types. However, I don't believe a twin actually does have a maximum. So I think that's the width and where we are.
Thank you. All right. I think Chris actually did cover most everything else. Other than that, I think parking is a topic we're going to continue to explore. So, but I'll open it up to all the board members for questions at this point for either the applicant or staff or either Borough or Township.
Mr. France, I think there was just one question we might want to explain it came up a couple times in my notes, is the relief, maybe just to review the relief with the audience, because I think that came up a couple times. And I think Jillian had a good slide of that. We can put that up and maybe just explain it.
Chris or Fred, do you want to walk us through the requested relief?
Yeah, I would ask Chris to do that.
I'm happy to do that. So the first waiver is from Subdivision Land Development Code to not require a profile of an existing road. And so that's just a typical requirement for any land development needs a profile of an existing road adjacent to the project. I think that's more applicable for a project that might be a larger subdivision and has multiple road connections. In this case, we have smaller driveways, and so I'm not sure what the value of that would be. And so we have asked for a waiver of that section, and we have been granted that waiver for other similar projects. The next is to Subdivision Land Development Code 450-21F, asks that all property lines are perpendicular to the right-of-way, which we do have for the 3 new property lines, but then that they continue to be a straight line the entire length of the side property line. So that is true in between lots 2 and 3, and also between 3 and 4. But the property line between lot 1 and 2, we propose to follow the center of the stream, as that we feel is a logical place to separate the 2 properties so that you wouldn't end up with a small sliver of property on another side of the concrete channel that would be difficult to maintain. And then lastly is section 450-18E, which asks of the subdivision code, which asks that parking spaces be 10 by 20 and up to 30% can be reduced to 9 by 18. We are showing all spaces at 9 by 18 to help reduce impervious, and this was also another waiver that has been requested on other applications and has been granted. And if I could say one other thing I wrote down was the tree removal. There are 14 trees that we have proposed to be removed currently that are viable. There is a 15th that is labeled as dead on the plan. And only 3 of those are greater than 15 inches. So many of them are smaller trees. I don't know if it helps at this stage, but I do have photos that show, from the street, it looks like it's a very dense property, but it's really kind of brush at the front. And once you get through, there's a little opening in it. If you get through it, you see that it really opens up near the floodplain, and there's, mown grass back there. So some people might be surprised by the number of trees. It's not really as densely wooded as you might think when looking at it on the street.
Well, one thing I would like to add, if I may, and that is this is what's called a planned community. So there will be a declaration of covenants that relates to this community, to use of parking, guest parking, and things of that nature, and also particularly with respect to the floodplain. As you may know, Glack and Thomas Panzak has been engaged as the landscape architect, but I believe that there had been some suggestion by staff, by perhaps the Lower Merion Conservancy, that we take a deeper, a more careful view of the floodplain area on this property and what might be done to treat it as best it can be treated. So our client has engaged Land Studies. Kelly Gutschall is going to be involved in this project. There are conditions of approval that require cooperation and meetings with the shade tree commissions of Lower Merion and Narberth. And we also anticipate working with the Lower Merion Conservancy as it relates to the preparation of our landscape plan, which, as Chris said, is a requirement at the preliminary plan stage, and we will be sharing and discussing that with you at that time.
Scott, I've got a question. I don't know whether this is the right time for the applicant.
Sure.
Okay. I'm particularly interested in the comments of the Lower Merion Conservancy, specifically with regard to the suggestion that the floodplain be maintained as a no-mow zone. The suggestion that trees be planted in the open area behind the dumpster pad, the berm to be created downhill from the anticipated level spreader, and the proposed geotechnical evaluation to be done to evaluate the depth of the groundwater. I'm assuming, I'd like to know what your position is with regard to that, and if those are things that you can agree to at this stage of the development.
Yeah, if I can take first crack at that, and then I'd ask Chris to chime in as well. These are all good comments. What we would like to do is have our professionals meet with, as I said, the professional staffs, shade tree commissions, but also with the Lower Merion Conservancy, and really roll up sleeves as this property is reviewed, looked at it in its entirety. I think there are ideas that will find their way into our landscape plan, but I'd rather allow that opportunity to happen as part of the overall preparation of a landscape plan rather than arbitrarily creating any requirements, which I think what you mentioned, much of that will find its way into that landscape plan.
How would you feel about a condition that just required you to meet with the Lower Merion Conservancy prior to submission of the preliminary plan?
That's what we intend to do, so I don't think we'd have any problem with that condition.
Okay, that's all I have.
Jillian, could I ask a question? So for those of you from Narberth, I'm the chair of the Narberth Planning Commission. So a couple of small clarifications. Commissioner Rosenbaum, I believe there already is a condition that the applicant should meet with the Lower Merion Conservancy along with the environmental advisory commissions of both Narberth and Lower Merion when they are preparing their plans for how the stream will be managed. So it's much appreciated that you support that, and we'll, we're hopeful you will support that happens in as robust a way as possible. Secondly, a very small, Chris, I know, Chris Yohn, I know very carefully from experience not to contradict you, but I think, because you know the codes very well, but I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that the maximum building width for any building in the 3B district is either 65% of the lot width or 42 feet, whichever is less. I tried to check it and look it up just now. So your building, if it's 42 feet wide, comes right within the, the allowable maximum, because I think your lot's 100 feet wide. So 42 feet would be the maximum, if I'm not mistaken. So it would be compliant with the code. And then there was a question earlier about the process, the order of operations, how things, in what order are questions asked and evaluated in a land development process, which Chris Lesswing, you answered. Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but the structure of this process is also dictated by state law, if I'm not mistaken, that the state municipalities planning code sort of lays out the process by which municipalities stages by which it reviews applications. And so we tend to follow that code in the way that law and the way we develop our own codes. So for the person who's asking about how do we decide what to review when, we have a code that tells us how, but that code actually has to be consistent with state law. Sometimes it's frustrating to me too, to be honest with you, but that's how we got there. I would like to ask a couple questions if I could. I know some of the planning commissioners in Narberth are very concerned about the safety of ingress and egress, and some of the people who made public comments were concerned as well. So if I could, I'd like to ask a couple of questions about that. I'd like to ask a couple of questions of our borough engineer, Eric Johnson, who is on screen, and then one of the applicant in regard to that. I think it might help clarify for the public some of the issues that are being considered and how they are considered in a process like this. So so Eric, I'll start, if I may, with a couple questions for you. The first is this roadway is a roadway that PennDOT controls, and so PennDOT has to give permission for any connection to the roadway. It's in Lower Merion Township as well. I'm wondering if you can explain to us the process through which an application to make a connection to a PennDOT road is processed. What's actually the process that has to be gone through to get permission to do this?
Right. So at this point, we're at the sketch plan, and the applicant has been soliciting feedback not only from Lower Merion and Narberth, but has also had some preliminary discussions with PennDOT to try and feel out where, what is everyone going to want to see, when we're trying to get access to the property, what's the township and the borough, what are their concerns, and then what are PennDOT's concerns? Because ultimately, as you were saying, this is a road that is owned by PennDOT, so they will have the the final say, with some direction from the municipalities. The next step that would occur would be during the preliminary plan submission, the actual formal plan. The applicant will prepare a transportation impact study that will assess the impact of this development on the surrounding roadways and identify any upgrades that may be required, and what's the best way to provide site access. That's reviewed by municipalities and ultimately sent to PennDOT for their review and ultimate approval. So they're at the beginning stage, and there are several steps that will be coming tied to the various application portions of this development.
Does PennDOT have the ability to deny a connection to this roadway?
PennDOT is responsible for the road. Now, all properties, PennDOT is going to provide access. If you have a property that fronts on a PennDOT road, they will allow you to gain access to your property. We as a municipality would not be holding up a project for access to a property. PennDOT will work with the applicant with input from municipalities, but ultimately they would find the best solution to provide access to that property.
So there would be access, but there might need to be some modifications or improvements or conditions to how that works.
Correct. Yes.
You referred to a traffic study. Can you, in your letter, you also you provided to the borough and to the applicant a letter based on your review of the application and recommendations you've made, and you've asked the applicant to consider. One of them had to do with pedestrian circulation. Can you describe that recommendation and how that's related to the traffic study?
Right. So in connection with the development, you're going to be creating residential homes on this street, on the frontage, which is going to bring additional pedestrian traffic. So what we've asked that is part of this development, and ultimately, as part of the review by the township and by PennDOT, that the applicant, takes reasonable steps to ensure pedestrian accommodations are provided.
either along this frontage or, if applicable, across crossing Wynwood Road. And essentially we would be asking that is made part of any review of this property, of the site access by PennDOT.
Would that potentially lead to pedestrian improvements?
If it was found, potentially, it would be, all the pedestrian access around the site would be reviewed. And if there is a reasonable improvement that could be made, then it is a possibility. However, ultimately, anything within the right of way of a PennDOT road is PennDOT's decision in the end.
Can you, especially for the public who are in this meeting right now, can you explain the way Narberth can monitor, can influence, can make sure it keeps its eye on this traffic analysis stage?
Right. So when this, the applicant will prepare the study and all the proper documentation as part of the land development process. That is then submitted to both Narberth and Lower Merion, in which it will be reviewed by the engineer. So in Narberth's case, it would be me, and then we also have my counterpart, who is a borough traffic engineer, would review the study and provide comment and feedback on that study, basically confirming the findings of the study.
And how do you collect input from the public or from the community when you are looking at that kind of submission?
Right. So we are reviewing it on behalf of the municipality, and this, just like we're here tonight, any application would be before the Planning Commission and before Council, and we can solicit feedback, from those venues, and just as we are tonight, we are hearing what concerns are of the residents, and that can be, we'll be reviewing the plan accordingly.
Would you be open if I were to ask one of our Narberth planning commissioners to kind of directly stay in touch with you throughout this process and kind of make sure
we can.
that? Thank you.
Yes.
So one last question, Eric, because some folks I've talked with in the community and on the planning commission have a hard time believing that there's any safe way for there to be access and egress to this property, given that the lane that it is adjacent to is a turning lane for the nearby intersection. So based on your understanding of road engineering and road design, how would you respond to that?
Right. So it's not a unique situation in the area. You have a property that has a very long turning lane out front of it. So if it'd be no different than a vehicle approaching a road, you come up to the road, you look for, per the traffic laws, you look for a clear opening in the road, and you proceed out. Now, if it's the concern that you would have here is not so much it's a volume. It's I would imagine what the concern is if someone is trying to leave the site and make it into this straight lane going across the turning lane, you potentially could have a situation where a vehicle is trying to nudge into traffic across a turning lane. So the working through that, and that's part of the consideration that would be made to ensure that the driveway will have will be installed properly and safe enough. But that's something that would all be fleshed out and worked through as part of the traffic impact study and the review process that would occur.
So the purpose of this phase.
Can I just interrupt for a quick second?
Sure.
Really good question, and thank you for asking it, Todd. Eric, can you tell us, do you know the distance between the planned exit of this development and the turn at North Wynwood?
The turn at North. Are you speaking of to the intersection?
Yeah, so where you would turn to go under the bridge. In other words, what I'm trying to get at is there a minimum standard when there's a situation where you have to cross a turn lane in order to get to a through lane? Is there a standard of distance that is considered reasonable? That kind of thing.
So the ultimate goal. So I do not know you're correct. You would like to see the driveway as far from the intersection as possible. So, to that end, the situation, we would like to see the driveway as far away from the intersection as possible. I do not know off the top of my head the exact standard that would minimum required distance. But the way you potentially improve the situation is by moving that driveway as far as you can from the intersection. So moving it as far down the site as possible. Therefore, you're minimizing the conflicts that could arise between vehicles that would be stacked up at the intersection.
I hear you, and I don't expect you to know the numbers off the top of your head. That wasn't my point.
Right.
But just off the top of my head, maybe you make the turn in, the turn out, and the turn out, the turn in, if you know what I mean, to change that around and create more distance if you're going to go with the two entrance scenario. I also think that the fact that this is a smaller development now with less traffic in and out helps to mitigate some of the traffic concern here. But I think Todd's asked really good questions.
So thank you. And I did have one question for Chris, Chris Young, which follows on to what you were getting at. So Chris, in Eric's letter and even in some of the correspondence I've seen from PennDOT, there's the suggestion that you should consider the possibility of moving access further away from the intersection. That's also one of the conditions, is that you will look at that as whether that's possible. Do you have any thoughts about that right now, in terms of what the challenges might be?
So we did have a two-way driveway on the initial submission, and then in one of the next rounds we split it into the two separate driveways, and one was closer to the floodplain. But I guess going back to the two-way driveway, there was a zoning concern in both codes with the maximum width of the driveway, which we'd have to talk to Eric and also the borough zoning officer about, and the Lower Merion Township zoning officer to confirm. But then the other concern is really just all the other minor changes we've made along the way to push buildings back further from the street, that it's kind of, one little piece in all the pieces that go together. So, we've agreed to talk about that more and really confirm for good that's not the ideal solution.
Thank you, Julian. That's all I have on this topic. Thanks for indulging that.
I have a question for Chris Jan. I'm happy to see that the setback issue was addressed and that the buildings are set back further from the street. It's my understanding from what Jillian said earlier in the evening that the mini-max setback under the Lower Merion Code is 10 to 20 feet, and that the Narberth requirement for the minimum setback, front yard setback, is 25 feet. But I believe the proposal is for 20 feet setback. So isn't that not in compliance with the Narberth Code?
So the way we looked at the development, and it's difficult because it's split in both municipalities, but we look at that municipal boundary as everything on the Lower Merion side has to meet the Lower Merion standards, and everything on the Narberth side has to meet the Narberth standards. And so that's why you'll see two zoning charts on the plan showing compliance with all of those. And for lot 2, we have a portion in Lower Merion, we have calculations for, say, impervious coverage, and then the portion of lot 2 in Narberth we have for impervious coverage. So to answer the setback, the Lower Merion is the one that is applicable here. However, we've pushed the front of the porch to the back to basically all the way back to the maximum. And I think where that even fits with Narberth is that Narberth allows porches to come in front of the setback. And so the fact that the front of the porch is at that 20-foot maximum, the facade of the building is 6 feet behind that at 26 feet, we arguably meet both, even though I'd say we don't have to.
Okay, and I just had a second question, which probably would take a less of a response. The stormwater management facility in the rear, is any portion of that located in the floodplain? And if it is, it could be problematic.
No, and actually, that was another question that one of the neighborhood members said, was whether or not the buildings were in the floodplain. No, none of the proposed improvements are located in the floodplain. In fact, the only thing that might happen in the floodplain would be additional plantings if that's what comes out of the conversations with the Conservancy. But no, none of that will be located in the floodplain.
Okay. Well, that's all. Thank you.
I had what I hope is a fairly quick question, and it's maybe a little unusual to ask the applicant to address this, but I know in December, there was concern expressed that the applicant hadn't met with the Shortridge Civic Association. And I think I saw in our notes that that meeting had taken place, and I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to what concerns the neighbors raised and how you all addressed those.
So we did meet with the Civic Association on January 4th. And so we listened to the ward commissioner was there, as well as the chairman of the Civic, and then some community members. So they were a lot the same comments that we heard here. I would say one of them had to do with, one of the major ones that I remember had to do with when people exit the site, if they're turning right, if they can't turn left, then how do they get down Wynwood Road? So that was one of the big questions. And then some of the others really had to do with floodplain, how that would be managed. And so I think we have conditions that address or will address at preliminary plan all of those questions. And we did, I should also say that was January 4th. We made the submission on January 15th, and then we did forward the revised plans to the Civic Association chairman and the ward commissioner again.
Mr. Chairman, if I may just add one thing here. Mr. Rosenbaum had raised this question about meeting with the Conservancy, and I appreciate Mr. Bresci pointing out that condition number 26, which is in the floodplain sections of these conditions, does address that we would review our riparian buffer planning plan with the Lower Merion and Narberth advisory councils and the Lower Merion Conservancy prior to the preliminary plan submission. I think the question may have also gone to, and this is what I was thinking at the time, that we would be agreeable to meeting with the Lower Merion Conservancy at the site prior to our preparation of that plan, so that we would have the input, before we actually prepare our plan, rather than simply review the plan with them after it's been prepared. So we would be agreeable to adding that to that condition.
Fred, could you comment on your client's position regarding the pedestrian path that was suggested by Lower Merion Conservancy? Is that something that you would consider?
I think it's something that we would look at as part of the overall landscape plan. I don't really understand, I confess, where exactly that might be, how it would be accessed and things of that nature. But I think it's fair that we would have a conversation about that. I'm not in a position to commit to anything, but certainly we could look at that.
Any other board questions? All right.
Well,
I think, yeah.
Sorry, are you taking Narberth board questions, or
Yeah,
would you
either
run just
board.
Let's see. I just wanted to clarify a little bit about the now that these are slated to be twins, the Narberth code would allow for 2 entrances if these were striped as twin lots, is my understanding, but not allow a single entrance unless it was a multifamily. So I assume somebody has taken a look at that, and I don't see any indication about the entrances to the buildings on the plan submitted so far. So I hope that gets resolved on a further code review if necessary. But I have to concur that my biggest objection really is the intersection and the transformation that it's going to make on this intersection, not only for cars, I think probably least for cars. My concern is really about pedestrian access across this road and bicycle path in all directions. I myself use this intersection for both bicycle and pedestrian access daily, and it's unclear even today which lane to use if you're taking the bicycle west on Wynwood Road. And if we're going to develop this intersection with these additional entrance and egress of this development, I'd like it to be clear how bicycles are going to navigate this intersection, because it seems like most of what we have to do, most of what's going to happen to this intersection is going to be very accommodating to automobiles and where they should go and under what circumstances and where they should turn. I think on the whole, this development it's a very car accommodating development. It has a lot of parking, although I appreciate that the impermeable surface is greatly reduced. So I think that's going in the right direction. But really, I'm not sure what duty we have to okay the striping of new lots that open up onto an intersection or this type of block in general. These lots, I think it has to be pointed out that these lots 2, 3, and 4 don't exist today at all. This is one big lot that's fronted on Elmwood Ave in Narberth. And I'm not sure why we're considering allowing these lots to open up onto this kind of intersection without a real solid intersection improvement plan behind it. Someone at a previous meeting said that if only we had that roundabout in place, this development could really access the roundabout quite easily, but we don't. And I feel like any plan I've seen so far is going to short shrift pedestrian crossings, and it's going to short shrift bicycle maneuverability, as well as stroller access and handicapped access. And I would like to hear more about what further down in the process we might do to improve this intersection. Whether it's create additional street crossings or off-site street crossings. And I'm talking about street crossings across Wynwood Road, not only across the stream. So I would really like to hear where in the process that could get considered, if not now.
Todd.
Jim, who would you like to hear from? Eric Johnson about that from the applicant? Who would you like to hear from?
Sure. Yeah.
Chris Lesswing could.
Okay, sure, Chris.
I apologize. I'm going to ask you to ask the question again. I was taking notes on it, and I'm not exactly sure what the question was to me.
Okay, Chris, if let's say we wanted to improve this intersection, like not just let it deteriorate and fall into a very intensely car used in and out at this intersection. And let's say we wanted to continue to have people walk out of Narberth on their way to the Wynwood Shopping Center and bike out of Narberth on their way to the Wynwood Shopping Center and bike along Wynwood Road. Is there a way in this process of okaying this development that we can take those things to account where we can leave the intersection better than we found it? Because everything I've heard so far, it seems like the intersection is going to be worse. It's going to be, we're going to have a lot of car, car management is taking place at this intersection at the expense of pedestrian and bicycle.
Well, Jim, that's a really good question. So I've had conversations with our engineer, Joe, who's on the call. One of the conditions that we have in here is requires the applicant to look at that intersection for pedestrian sort of mobility. Now, I admit, when I come from Ardmore into Narberth, I come by Woodside. I don't come through the tunnel. I go around it. I bypass that intersection on a bicycle because I'm using what we're calling the mainline greenway, which is actually developed in conjunction with Lower Merion and the member Kimberly Bezak from Narberth to get around on low stress routes. We would try to avoid Wynwood Road and the tunnel because of the amount of the volume on Wynwood Road and the amount of activity. So for bicycling, I'm going to put that off to the side. But for pedestrian mobility, could it get better through the development? I think our engineers are going to look at it. They're going to inventory and say, well, it's a brand new traffic light. Okay, what's there? And I've tried to look at this, and our engineers will look at it more in detail. How is the crosswalk? Are the pedestrian signals for crossing efficient? Are they timed properly? I mean, there are ways that this could actually get better. I think some of that key infrastructure is already in place. Having the hand-manned signals that cross Wynwood is very important, but maybe there's a timing to that could make it better. I don't know because I've never taken it. We've seen this. We have these same issues in Ardmore by Ardmore Station, where a simple timing that gave 3 seconds to pedestrians before cars moved actually improved the mobility and significantly reduced accidents in there and conflicts with pedestrians. So yeah, that's something we can definitely look at. But I think more important globally, you can only do so much on one development. I know that there are members of Narberth Council and members of the Lower Merion Board of Commissioners that are very interested in traffic calming and pedestrian mobility on this area. This process that your chairman has initiated of multi-municipal cooperation with Lower Merion Township is really the step in the right direction. You now have at least 4 locally elected officials who are looking at this. Now in Lower Merion, their wards are connected, Merion and essentially the Wynwood Shortridge area. Those 2 wards, they front on the Wynwood Road. I'm not sure how it works in Narberth, if everybody's elected at large or not, but at least that interest is together those communities can come up and begin that conversation, because it's not one intersection, it's the corridor. You're trying to look at this from the Giant all the way down to City Avenue. And traffic improvements work better in series than they do individually. So what we'll try to do is, of course, through this, maximize the efficiency of the intersection. That's in the conditions of approval. Our engineers are already looking at that. But then going forward, I think we can all start to have that conversation about how do we cross the road? Right? I mean, I think that's really what we want to do. That intersection of Woodside could certainly use some help. I know Lower Merion's looking at another mid-block crosswalk closer to Remington and Bowman. So let's look at that all together. And I think then there's great opportunity.
That sounds great. Can we maybe consider looking at another mid-block crosswalk at Woodside or at Chestnut, perhaps, where people cross to get to Shortridge and back? Maybe these things ought to be on the table for future examination.
Agreed, and I think we've gotten that to the local officials. And when I present this on Wednesday to the Lower Merion Building and Planning Committee, I will highlight the multi-municipal cooperation and certainly the need for that in the ongoing cooperation.
Thanks.
So, Todd, tell me what you think. Obviously we have two bodies here to deliberate and come to agreement, and then the conditions and what to sort out. We should probably handle those one at a time. I'm happy to cede to you. I think Narberth has, I don't know, maybe the robust discussion given the size of the development on the Narberth side. Is now an okay time to initiate that, and then we can follow it on the Lower Merion based on what you come to?
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, I think it would be the right time to do that. So I'll remind the Narberth Planning Commissioners that there are 3 actions that we are being asked to make a recommendation on. One is the 3 waivers from the requirements of the Subdivision and Landscape Development Ordinance, which have been explained a few times already this evening. One is a recommendation to council about a determination of the proper orientation of the building on, I believe it's lot 2, the southernmost lot. Our code would nominally require the building to face Elmwood Avenue, but the council can determine that facing Wynwood Road is more appropriate. And then third, to approve the tentative sketch plan, and I would ask that approval include the recommendation to council to approve that include the conditions that Lower Merion Township staff have presented to you, which, as I believe Chris and Julian remarked, I've been involved in those conversations and have sometimes had conversations with you and Borough Council members to get input along the way. So it's 3.5 things: waivers, determination, and the recommendation about the tentative sketch plan and the conditions therein. So I guess I would like to ask if anyone would like to make any comments about it, if there's any discussion that you'd like to have before we ask for a motion and vote. Would anyone like to make a comment or further discussion? All right. If there's no further discussion, at least at this point, then I would ask, would somebody like to make a motion that we approve the waivers that have been requested, that we recommend approval of the waivers, that we recommend approval of the orientation of the house on the building on lot 2 to face Wynwood Road, and that we recommend the approval of this tentative sketch plan with the conditions that have been attached to it in the documentation we received from Lower Merion Township. If we make a motion, we can still have further time for discussion or amendment to those conditions or other things you would like to suggest. But to do that, we need to get a motion on the floor. Would someone like to make the motion?
I so move.
Jim moves. Do we have a second for that motion? Heidi seconds. Okay. All right. Is there anything anyone would like to recommend in terms of revisions to the conditions, additional conditions, or other points of consideration you'd like us to discuss before I call for a vote?
Well, I think I mostly said the. Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Am I on? Sorry. Okay, I mostly said the way I feel in my question, but I'm curious if we can attach a specific condition or some kind of agreement that the pedestrian and bicycle crossings be examined and determine whether there's any improvement to be made alongside of this approval.
I believe one of the conditions, first of all, and I did miss a step here. which I'll get to in a second. But in Eric Johnson's letter, he does request that there be an evaluation of pedestrian circulation, which I believe is carried through into one of the conditions. Jillian, maybe you can help me find the number of that condition. If anyone wants to reference it.
I believe it's a condition 17, if I'm looking, if the numbering hasn't changed in it. And it reads, the applicant shall submit a pedestrian study which documents pedestrian routes from the proposed development to a logical destination, identifies gaps or obstacles in the existing pedestrian environment, and identifies potential improvements.
Yeah. I would be amenable to including looking at bicycle circulation as well as pedestrian circulation.
And I would add crossings to that. If we could be specific about pedestrian crossings across Wynwood Road.
Fred, does it sound to you like we could work language around that would be acceptable to you?
Fred, you're on mute.
Thank you. That sounds reasonable to me. I think it's implicit in the condition as it now reads, but that's a little more express. So I don't think we have a problem with that.
Thank you. We appreciate that. Are there any other issues you'd like to raise in terms of conditions, modifications thereof? Any other comments or questions? Dave.
Is there a way to get a read from PennDOT about the safety of vehicular movements in and out of this site before we commit to this plan? I would submit that the driveways are the absolute crux of this design. And in my personal opinion, as a designer of many, many years of experience, I look at this plan and I see a significant hazard with those two driveways that close to a high-speed turn through the tunnel. That is an accident waiting to happen. So
your question is, can we get a read from PennDOT?
So I would like to get a read from PennDOT before giving a thumbs up to this whole entire development proposal. I'm uncomfortable, as I have articulated in previous meeting, very uncomfortable accepting this design without some assurance from somebody that knows more than any of us about the traffic movement that is going to be experienced at this intersection.
So Eric, could you tell us what to expect from PennDOT and when, and what read we have already?
So I'll speak for a minute, and maybe Christian could fill in where they are. To this point, the applicant's team has had several communications via email and phone calls with PennDOT over the last few months, and that has led, that has guided a lot of their proposed design of the driveways. Now, does that mean things could still be improved? Potentially, but Chris, maybe you just spell out what your communications have been to this point.
Jillian, do you mind allowing Frank Tavani to speak? He's the traffic engineer for the applicant, and so he's the one who had the direct correspondence with PennDOT.
Yes.
Thank you.
He is here with us now.
While you're getting Frank, I just want to remind everybody that, the state law prohibits us. We cannot hold up a project that requires a PennDOT highway occupancy permit for access. I share your concerns. I share all your concerns about access on this site, and I know it needs to be improved. And Frank will tell you about the conversations he's had with PennDOT to this point. They haven't said no. Does that mean that he can go through the process, do his traffic study, and they bring up other concerns that modify this design? Absolutely. But like I said, there is a state law that does not allow us to hold up a project due to access to a state highway.
Well, isn't that stupid?
So Wynwood Road
more than that. That is just incredibly stupid. There people's lives are at stake in a situation like this, I believe. I now have a daughter and her husband and their 3-year-old child who live at the 1 block away at Woodside and Wynwood Road, and I've observed since they've moved into their house there, the traffic along Wynwood Road travels at in excess of 50 miles an hour, and it gets worse at rush hour. So when people are entering and exiting that driveway, regardless of what traffic engineers may calculate based on published standards, the traffic is ripping along that road like a race course. So nobody can convince me that there's not a significant hazard there. We need to slow down we need to slow down the traffic. Is that going to happen? I very much doubt it. I've watched coming out of the tunnel and heading over to where my daughter lives. I've observed people trying to cross the intersection, across the pedestrian crosswalk, and it is damn scary. So the way it's currently designed may be able to be fixed, but right now it's hellish. So with that as a background, I cannot see that this project doesn't represent a significant hazard to all the neighbors in this community.
Yeah, so Mr. Nardo correctly pointed out, this road is a state roadway, so it does have, PennDOT does have jurisdiction over the roadway, and it will take its role very seriously and very carefully look at all of the different aspects of the application. Mr. Johnson also correctly summarized that for the last several months, I've been working with PennDOT, emailing them plans, keeping them abreast of how the plans have been evolving with time. And most recently, in the last few weeks, have gained conceptual approval for the current unit count and current driveway configuration. We have not yet formally started a highway occupancy permit application. We wanted to make sure that we were far enough along in this process before starting that. But I'm confident that we have moved in the right direction and we're building consensus. And although I do understand that travel speeds and things are a concern, I would respectfully point out that with 6 units, the fact that we are restricting outbound left turns altogether, the crossing activity in and out of this site is going to be a fraction of the crossing activity that currently occurs along Wynwood Road, both at Yerkes Road west of the traffic signal and at Woodside Avenue east of the traffic signal. So those intersections seem to operate reasonably well today with no left turn restrictions at all. And with these driveways hosting just a fraction of traffic relative to those unsignaled intersections in the immediate vicinity, I'm hopeful that we can come to a good outcome with this.
I have to jump in and concur with what Jim said. We're in a situation. I appreciate what Joe said, but on the other hand, we're being asked to recommend to council that the design proceed on a design that I also, as an architect with over 40 years experience, just believe is inherently unsafe. Not sure what comfort PennDOT will give me to override, my best professional opinion. So I find, I feel that we're in a real dilemma here.
Heidi, everyone else has commented. Do you have any comments to make or questions before we ask for a vote?
I agree. It's that's probably one of the least desirable aspects of this whole plan. Of course, access to the stream is important, but I do know from my experience on Borough Council that this has been an ongoing issue regarding Wynwood Road and access to Shortridge Park from Narberth. And I don't know whether simultaneously Lower Merion and Narberth could get together on how to make that road safer in general. I mean, I'm thinking about all the driveways that are off Montgomery Avenue, you know, into houses, and those people leaving those driveways have an equal problem. Cars going down Montgomery Avenue just as fast. So I don't know what the answer is. At least there's been a reduction in the number of cars coming out of the driveways.
Well, I agree that the design, I think we all agree, the design has gotten substantially better as the unit count's gone down. I was looking at it this afternoon, wondering, you know, what the possibilities of moving the curb cut further down Wynwood Road is, and how that could be made to work. I didn't take pencil to paper to start to sketch ideas, but you know, I think inherent in the problem is how close. While we were talking, I did a quick scale. It looks like that egress is about 120 feet from the point where the direction turns into North Wynwood before it goes into the tunnel. And I keep on thinking, you got to move things down Wynwood Road to make this work at all. And I'm, you know, I guess I would love to see something that recognizes that the solution lay in getting further away from that intersection.
I would like to add that just even allowing right turn on red at the tunnel is very dangerous, because people could be, I almost ran into a pedestrian, you know, because right turn on red, or even just a green arrow, you're not looking for pedestrians. No, I think it must have been a red that they were crossing, and you're not looking for pedestrians there. I think that something needs to happen with that light.
Okay, so I think we need to call the question, unless there's any further informational questions you have. So what I'd like to do is do a roll call and vote, and I'm going to take the usual step of voting first and make a little statement about this. I'd like to start by saying that, as I did at the last meeting, this is a site that I think we all hoped would never be built on. And I think we all recognize it's an extremely problematic site. And I think the borough probably 10 years ago had opportunities that were pointed out in the open space master plan to do something about this site, and the borough didn't. So now we have this application. And as you know, Joe pointed out, and as others have pointed out, that you know, we have a very difficult situation where we have to convey to the applicant our sense of the community and what the community's concerns are and what issues are. But we also have a responsibility to uphold the codes and laws of our state and of our borough. And at this point, for all intents and purposes, this development has met our code. And I have to say that, in Lower Merion's code, and in terms of what is evaluated at this phase of the project, and not only does it meet the code, but I think the applicant has worked extremely hard and in good faith to do so, and to take into account the concerns we've had. So our choice is really to decide whether we believe in the next phases of this process, where there'll be traffic studies, pedestrian studies, bicycle studies, that we can achieve an outcome that will not only improve this development, but also in some way we can't figure out yet, help improve the area around it as well. The conditions in this plan that we're going to, in this tentative sketch plan that we're going to vote on, lay out processes for looking at circulation, for looking at how the riparian corridor is handled. I think the applicant has gone very far to agreed, a collaborative process is doing that. I think, you know, as far as planning goes, that's what planning is. It's a process, it's iterative. And thankfully here we have, I believe, an applicant who is, again, working very hard with us to address what concerns we have within the overall framework of what state law allows us to do. So for those reasons, I will vote to recommend this to council, to recommend the waivers and the determination and the conditions that have been negotiated. So I will vote yes to recommend this to move forward. Heidi, would you care to share your vote with us?
I concur. I vote yes.
Dave, where do you stand?
I reluctantly vote yes. Yeah.
Jim Spear, how do you vote?
Well, I had been prepared to vote no based on my worries about this intersection, but I feel like the applicant has assured me that there will be a process of examining crossings and bicycle access on these roads and circulation on these roads. So I look forward to that process, and I will vote yes.
Okay, Jim Cornwell.
I stand alone, I'm afraid. As I've said in the past, this project is fundamentally flawed. It is fundamentally flawed because it is an attempt to put too much development on a site that cannot reasonably sustain that development. Accordingly, I vote no.
Okay, well, thank you. So that is a 4-1 vote to recommend this. We will convey to council, Jim, your concerns, because we all share your concerns no matter how we voted. We all share them. So with that, Scott, I will turn it back to you for your commission. And then after the Lower Merion Planning Commission votes, I think we should offer them the respect of listening into their deliberations and vote. Then we will reconvene on our platform for the rest of our meeting.
Thank you, Todd. And I can say off the bat, I think we benefit from the input that you just provided and be part of this conversation. With that, I'll move to our board, and I think we'll carry our tradition of going down the line for final comments or any recommendations to the conditions of approval that have been provided us. I will say I think we are already agreed upon with condition, was it 26, I think Jillian, the comment was made to just edit that to say that they would meet prior to developing the plans as well as reviewing the final plans. And then 17, I don't know if we have any other edits to make. I think we discussed that the applicant was recognized the issues at hand that we want to hear back on. With that, I'll open up the floor. Whoever wants to speak first.
Scott, I could go. Jillian, I don't know if you got the email.
Yes.
So I was trying to be more organized than I usually am, and have some language that I want to propose to 3 conditions. The first 18 would be a new one. I think it fits in with and is an extension to the walkability section.
Sorry, Dave, 1 sec. Jillian, we have the wrong screen up, I think.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. Here we go.
There you go.
So the applicant shall consider the feasibility of a pedestrian path from the Narberth Bridge along the stream corridor to allow public use of open space and connectivity of the new homes to the larger neighborhood. The new language is all underlined. To 26, I thought that the change would be to meet with because they said they would do that, but I'd also add the Narberth and the Lower Merion Shade Tree Commissions to that. And then at the end of it, I thought it was kind of, the condition was kind of strangely worded because it said enhancing opportunities for habitat. And I think really the point is enhancing opportunities for use and enjoyment of the habitat, which I think would be broad enough to cover human use and use by wildlife. And then lastly, I think they probably were going to do this anyhow, but I think it's important that the applicant meet with the two civic associations to review and discuss both the traffic study and the preliminary plan and traffic issues prior to the completion and submission of the preliminary plan and the traffic study. I think we've heard lots and lots of stuff here about concerns about traffic safety and ingress and egress. I know that's more of a preliminary plan issue, and in anticipation of the joint meetings, I think that an awful lot could be accomplished by consulting with the two civic associations in advance. And I would advocate that we add that as an additional condition number 21. So those are my proposals.
If I can just follow up to Mr. Rosenbaum's last condition, I think what we need to do, Jillian and I will do between now and the Building and Planning Committee, is I just reached out to the Traffic Safety Division. And what we'll do is we're going to get some reports. We're going to find out how many traffic accidents, how many pedestrian accidents, how many bicycle accidents have occurred and have been reported on this stretch of road, in the last 5 years or so. We'll try to dig up that information so at least we have a better handle on some of the facts, because I think some of it we're dealing with perception. We all think traffic's going too fast, but are there actual accidents? I think those are documented. So I think we want to have that information for Wednesday night.
Chris, I'm fine with that. I don't think that changes my view that they should be meeting with the
No,
civic.
I don't think they're related, David. I think it just builds on it that we should have facts going into making our decision.
Yep. I think it's it's pretty obvious what the big deal concerns are here on both the Narberth and the Lower Merion side, and I think just emphasizing the need for continued engagement is important. That's all I have.
I guess I had one question. So would the shade tree, for your recommendation for 26, would the shade tree commission be looking at, their review would be limited to the riparian buffer?
No, they can't look at the riparian buffer. The Lower Merion Shade Tree Commission by ordinance is restricted to advising the township upon matters within the public right of way. The riparian buffer is outside of the right of way. So they can, comment. I mean, they're very defined by code, what they can do. So there's enough groups looking at this so that everybody will get their piece, but the Shade Tree Commission kind of needs to stay in the road. They actually have a lane they need to stay in.
I put it in there, Chris, because I thought that there was discussion about the landscaping plan, and that would include the stuff in the public right away.
I think we do have a condition in there that they work with us along the frontage to review it. I actually think it's a PennDOT right of way, but I think their input would be useful, and I think we always want to get their thoughts on spacing and street tree.
And David, item number 11 says that the applicant shall meet with the Narberth Shade Tree Commission to review the placement of landscaping along the stream corridor. So that's already in there. Yeah. I would take both of these out in this reference.
Okay, that's fine.
I don't have with number 21. Chris, as long as you're okay from a staff viewpoint, I just don't want to put any onerous burdens that are not backed up by anything. I'm okay with it, but if you feel this goes too far as creating a process where the civic association is a greater role than they are intended or legally allowed, just please let me know if you. Otherwise, I'm okay with it.
Mr. Chairman, could I just comment on two of these? My first question on number 21 is whether there is a Narberth Civic Association.
That's a good question.
If there is, we can meet with them, but if there isn't, I wouldn't want it to be a.
Yeah, there's definitely a Narberth Civic Association. You'll find me there as well. So
Okay,
I'll look forward to.
So that is the correct name of the Civic, Narberth Civic.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That was number one. The second comment was on number 26. What I had contemplated, and I don't know whether this reads this way, is that we would meet at the site with the Lower Merion Conservancy. Now, if someone from these other agencies, advisory councils wanted to meet with us, they're certainly welcome to join. But I was thinking that we would not have separate meetings at the site, but a single meeting at the site, followed up by whatever appropriate discussions they are. So
I think you'd have the flexibility to do that. I left it open because of the pandemic. I didn't know whether you were going to be able to meet in person or not, given what was going on, and
right.
Meet with could be physically meet, or it could be virtually meet.
Yeah, that's fine. So meet with is good. I think it would be helpful to walk the site. I think that probably could be arranged to be done in a safe way.
So. Okay. So number 21 is, there already isn't a number 21 that specifies a traffic impact study. So this proposal either is a new item, or is it being merged with existing 21?
You can give it a new number. I don't care.
Okay. All right, and then delete the Narberth and Lower Merion Shade Tree Commissions.
Yep, that's fine.
Shall meet with, that makes sense. I'm not sure I understand the very last, for uses and enjoyment of the habitat.
I put it in there because I think that's better than what it said originally, which was just opportunities for the habitat.
Uses and enjoyment by whom? By humans of the habitat?
That's what I was saying, was I was leaving it vague enough to cover both humans and wildlife.
Well, I think addressing human use, I think, would be in a different item. This is, I think, more of an environmental riparian buffer concern, protecting water quality, managing stormwater. To me, we're mixing something that's very different. That could also be a worthy goal, but that would maybe be more in the front section on, I don't know, the landscape plan, or
Scott, I don't really care that much about the word and enjoyment. Yeah. If you want to say uses of the habitat, if I can get us closer to the finish line, okay, I'd be good for that.
Thank you. Yep. Okay, and then 18, I forgot to give out. The applicant shall consider the feasibility of a pedestrian path from the Narberth Bridge. Okay, that's the. Yeah, I still don't fully understand how that comes in. So, but I'm fine with the condition to explore it or consider it.
Yep. It's in the walkability section.
Yeah.
Yep.
That might need a new number. That does need a new number, though.
Yeah, that's why I gave it 18, but okay. That's fine.
Okay. All right. Further, any other comments, David, before we either reactions to these or other comments? Okay. Who would like to speak next?
I'll go next. So I appreciate hearing all of the Narberth board's comments regarding their concerns, and I would echo a lot of them, but mostly that this development has been adjusted as per concerns of the staffs involved, and the applicant has gone to pains to adjust the plan to address a lot of these concerns. I, like a lot of people, am sad that this particular patch of green is being developed, but that's really not the issue here. From our perspective, we have a job to do, and I think the applicant has met their obligation at this stage, and so I'm along with the majority of the rest of the ones I've heard so far as where I stand. I certainly have concerns that I hope will be addressed as we move forward. Thanks.
Thank you. Jerry or Adam?
Yeah, I'll just echo what Bill said. The fact that this project was scaled down, I think, will go far towards addressing the concerns of the neighbors and the community. There's less impervious cover, less traffic, more of the land is going to be left either in open space or undeveloped. And of course, the amount of stormwater generated will also be reduced. So I'm also disappointed to see this patch of green being developed, but the ordinances are what they are, and applicants can, as long as they comply with the ordinances, there's not a whole lot that we can do other than recommend certain conditions and work with the applicant to try to come up with a plan that will work for that particular location. So I would vote in favor of this approving this sketch plan with the conditions that were proffered by both the Narberth Commission and Lower Merion's Commission.
Thank you. Adam?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a lot else to add. I think the applicant has done a lot of work to make this more bearable to those of us that live nearby. I mean, I'm in Shortridge. I'm going to pass this development the entire time it's being built and for the rest of the time I'm here. So I'm glad to see the work that they've done, and I would vote yes at this point.
Thank you. And my final comments will be brief as well. I'm also very enthused at the process and how this project has evolved. Going from 12 units to 6 units is really the watershed moment for getting this, I think, to a more realistic point of making sense. I do think we're still not through the process. There's still a lot to go, a lot of information to be both discovered and also evaluated through the preliminary land development process. So I don't look at this as we're approving this development tonight, but we're approving a sketch plan, and there's still lots of information to uncover. And hopefully that will make it more clear for both the applicant and both communities to get the best thing going forward. So with that, I also support this and with the conditions attached, and look for a motion.
I will move that we approve the sketch plan with the conditions and the modifications suggested.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Wait, Scott, just to clarify, I assume that means we're including the ones that I had suggested that you and I worked out.
Correct.
Okay, good. All right, now you can vote.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? And the motion passes. Once again, thank you, Narberth, for joining. Yes.
Just one question, Mr. France. I presume that Narberth is also satisfied with the additional conditions that were added by Lower Merion.
Thank you, Fred. I was just going to ask the same question. Does anyone on our Narberth Commission object to any of the modifications that were voted on? Okay, and then Jillian and Chris, you'll record the recommendation, the condition that the circulation studies also include bicycle movement as well. And I think we have a good package that everyone is satisfied with. Okay.
Thank you for addressing my oversight there.
Scott Yeah, Scott and Bill and Julian and Chris, as I've said in the past, you've been a tremendous support and assistance to us, and we appreciate it very much.
We look forward to continuing these conversations too.
Thank you, Todd. And I just wanted to reiterate that this item will be placed on the Building and Planning Committee meeting for this Wednesday, February 3rd.
Okay, so Narberth, we will re-adjourn on our Zoom meeting platform as soon as possible. We have to stop our meeting at 9:45, so you can be guaranteed that you won't be straggling in there late at night, but please join as soon as you can so we can get started. Thanks again. Good night.
Thank you.
Eric, I think you can go home if you'd like.
You mean to the other side of the room here?
We're not going to be talking about any curb cuts.
Okay. I can stay around if you need me, but if you don't need me, then you don't need me.
Eric, thank you. Thank you, Eric, for going through our rehearsed Q&A today.
Yeah, no problem. All right, I will. I'll see you guys all next month then.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, I'll talk to you later. Bye.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Chloe.
You're here.
Nice to see you again.
Yes, nice to see you.
Yeah. So you think Jim and Heidi resigned while we were away?
We're all here. Jim.
Maybe just
Jim
resigned.
I know. I thought he was in, and
I'm here.
I know, but Jim Cornwell, I saw him, and then he just.
Thank you for that link, Heidi.
I'm glad you have your name back.
Yeah, I hope everybody didn't think I was you.
Jim Cornwell's not here, but we actually have to adjourn in 10 minutes.
Oh my gosh.
Because I have to go get my son from work, and that just would be reasonable. So I think we should start. We'll reconvene the February meeting of the Narberth Planning Commission. I'll indicate that Dave Brower, Jim Spear, and Heidi Boys are in attendance. Jim Cornwell, we hope will join us in a minute. We have with us Chloe Moore from the Montgomery County Planning Commission and one member of the public. I'd like to start with basically all we have is announcements and updates. We have the approval of the minutes from January. I have not completed the minutes from January. As you recall, we took no action. We heard no cases. It was largely a presentation from Corey and Kathleen and Maggie about the process of developing preservation codes, ordinances in Pennsylvania with Q&A. And so that won't be extensively documented in our minutes. So I would ask your indulgence to submit those next month for your consideration. Don't see Jim yet. Second item is chair's update, zoning revisions. I'm happy to say that council approved the omnibus zoning bill. So we can now build omnibuses in Narberth. Don't tell anybody. There was very little comment or conversation because, as you know, most of these issues have been talked. We talked to council about these issues at previous meetings. So that work is completed. We have two applications we will probably hear next month. One is for 32 Sabine Avenue, which is a tear down of a house, a subdivision, and the construction of a twin. And another is 136 Merion, which is the reconfiguration of an existing building by removing a garage and adding a new portion of it to create 2 units. And I think it is also a subdivision as well. Those both were received this month by our deadline. You should have access to those applications. They should be posted on the borough website, and they should be on our calendar for March. The last thing is Jim is here. We have 2 items left. One is discuss the Heritage Action Plan work, and then public comment. Ira, will you be planning to make a public comment, or are you just listening in this evening?
No comment.
Okay, I wanted to make sure we save time for you in case you wanted to make a comment. But I'm glad you're with us. So we'll spend a few minutes introducing one of the three. So as you know, Maggie Dobbs left Montgomery County Planning Commission. Her work, her job in municipal management, and we will have a team of 3 planners from Montgomery County Planning Commission helping us for the next while. And one of them is with us tonight. It is Chloe Moore, and Chloe will be working with us on the Heritage Action Plan. So what I'd like to do with the next 5 or 6 minutes, Chloe, is to welcome you to Narberth. I hope you'll come back.
Thanks very much.
You missed our 2.5 hour project review, but we would love if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do at the Planning Commission.
Certainly. Good evening, everyone. It's very nice to meet you. I have been working with Montgomery County Planning Commission for almost 4 years as a community planner. I've worked with several other small boroughs in the county, including Hatboro, Satterton, East Greenville mainly. And I've worked. Sorry?
They be small but mighty? Like
Oh, definitely. Small but mighty. No, I love working with small Main Street communities. Lots of interesting projects and lots of interesting and dedicated citizens. I think in a small borough, people tend to be connected to their community and involved, and I think that's great. And I've helped with historic preservation ordinances in both Upper Salford and Hatboro, and so some experience with that kind of thing. I've worked with Corey before also, and I just looking forward to being part of the team, helping carry Narberth. I am familiar with the borough. I actually had a good friend that lived in Narberth as a kid, and I slept over at her house. I've actually spent the night in Narberth as a teenager, so I'm just familiar. I grew up in West Philly, and now I live in Mount Airy. So look forward to getting to know Narberth in this new way.
Chloe, I think you're talking about my block, right, on Grayling Ave?
Yes, that's Rockland Avenue also, and Grayling, both.
I gotcha.
I have friends on both of those places, but yep. Yeah. And I've met Jim Spear in real life before, so.
Who hasn't?
Jim knows everyone. But yeah, I mean, I grew up in the Philadelphia region, and so know people, all kinds of places.
We'd be glad to issue you a visa and invite you over anytime.
Okay. Glad I have the Narberth stamp of approval. So, yep, I just look forward to hearing where you are in the process and what I can do to help move things forward in the way that works for you.
Okay. Well, thank you. And I'm sorry we're rushed today, but this will be a big item on our agenda in the next few months. Dave and Heidi, can you take the remaining 3 minutes or so and just give us a brief update on what you've been doing the last month in regard to looking at how historic preservation might work in Narberth?
Yeah, we actually have already been introduced to Chloe. Heidi and I met with her and Maggie last week. As you all probably know, Chris has sent out or we've distributed a sample ordinance, and part of that ordinance is a checklist of items that a historic review board would consider important enough to review in various submissions. We have begun the process of going through those checklists with Chloe, first with Maggie and Chloe, now with Chloe, and we are developing that. So I think the hope at our next meeting at the beginning of March, we'll be able to dive into that. With 2 submissions, time constraints, but we would like to introduce it and move it along and start to get our thoughts to everybody on the commission and to keep the process moving. I think we all feel there's a certain urgency to this, me especially, because the house down the block from me was torn down last week in Woodbine. Took about 20 minutes for it to come down. So these things happen quickly. We're anxious to move this along. When I asked Corey what he thought a reasonable timeline was to get an ordinance in place, he surprised me by telling me he thought it could happen in 8 months or so. And so I would like to try to keep to that pretty aggressive schedule.
That would be the quickest anything has ever happened in Narberth, if that, if that came through.
Well, in my introduction to the question, I said, so what's it going to take, a year and a half? And he said, no, it won't take nearly, it shouldn't take nearly that long. So
you have
from his lips to God's ears.
Well, I just want to say Corey did us a huge favor by providing an ordinance that's he really tailored to Narberth. He listened to all of us, and he's recommending that it's an historic preservation ordinance, but it's a conservation. What do you call it? It's what am I trying to say? But anyway, he made it specific so that the borough could act as an entire historic district, and that this checklist Dave is talking about allows us to pick and choose the elements of individual properties that should have a second look, basically, by a HARB. But the ordinance is the thing that gets passed first, and then we decide what the area is or what buildings would be non-contributing, perhaps, if the entire district was selected.
Chloe, is that accurate that the ordinance actually does get passed first, or is the checklist in the plan an attachment to the ordinance?
So the checklist is typically part of the ordinance, but the district boundaries can be set later. So you can adopt the ordinance, which would include a checklist of things you would review, and then it wouldn't apply to anything at first, and then you'd adopt the district boundaries at a later date, and then all the contents of the ordinance would then apply to the district.
Okay, got it.
So our plan is to get our base ordinance and checklist to the state by their coming up meeting, I think, is in February or March, and then the one after that would be June. So we're shooting for their June meeting. They have quarterly meetings where they review townships submitted ordinances.
Do you recommend that the rest of us look at those checklists now? I know there was a little bit of hesitation last year.
I think it would be more productive if we presented them in a large meeting with our rationale. Then we could argue about pieces of it, but that would be my recommendation.
Well, we could forward the ordinance itself. I think that would be something that everyone could read through and see how it's tailored. I mean, it's not, it's blank where it should say Narberth. It's just a blank. So it's just a matter of inserting Narberth Borough into it to make it our ordinance. I don't know. Chloe, do you think have you seen the ordinance that Corey? Yeah. So, I mean, is there any reason for us not to share it at this point?
No, I mean, we could certainly all take a look at it.
I don't have a problem sharing the checklist either, except I think it would be probably most productive for Heidi and I to give a little presentation in March about what our checklists, we reconciled our two, what our checklist included and what it didn't include, and probably more importantly, what it didn't include.
And why, yeah.
And why.
One thing that is important for the rest of the commission to know, and the public, is another leg. So there's the map and there's the ordinance, but an important part of the ordinance is the process of how things work and who does what, and that that requires sort of some administrative coordination. And so one of the things I've asked Dave and Heidi to do over the next month is to touch base with Matt West and Kevin Walsh, begin the conversation about how this can be coordinated with the normal processes under which building permits and other types of applications are reviewed. That, I remember Corey telling me once, is sometimes the biggest issue.
Mhm.
Is how does a small municipality minister something like this? So I'm afraid I have to go to pick up my son. I'm happy to allow you to remain on this Zoom meeting and continue discussing this if you'd like. But what I'd like to ask is if there's anything else urgent anyone would like to bring to our attention, or whether we can call for an motion to adjourn.
That's fine. Yeah,
Okay.
we can adjourn.
Okay, so I'll take that as a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
So Dave, second, third, and fourth. So that means
It's unanimous.
So at 9:50 we are officially adjourned. Would you guys like to leave the Zoom platform open?
That's okay.
I'm
Drive
done.
carefully, Todd.
Way past my bedtime.
Yeah. Okay, guys, thank you so much. And listen, I want to thank you all for your hard work. You guys put a lot of time into this too, and a lot of emotional energy. And it's a really hard issue for us to look at. And I appreciate the fact that you always answer my calls and talk to me about this. And so we will keep at it. So thank you all.
See you next month, Chloe.
Okay.
Okay.
Good night,
Keep in touch.
everybody.